young lady in white duck and sailor hat looked at him and then spoke to her sister, Mrs. Earl. "Who's that hovering in the distance, Emily?" Mrs. Earl peered. "Why, it's Jimmy Trescott. Jimmy, come to the picnic. Why don't you come to the picnic, Jimmy?" He began to sidle toward the cloth, but at Mrs. Earl's call there was another outburst from many of the children. "He's got his picnic in a pail, got it in a pail." Minnie Phelps was a shrill fiend. "Oh, Mama, he's got it in a pail, see? Isn't it funny? Isn't it dreadful funny?" "What ghastly prigs children are, Emily," said the young lady. "They're spoiling that boy's whole day, breaking his heart, the little cats. I think I'll go over and talk to him." "Maybe you had better not," answered Mrs. Earl dubiously. "Somehow these things arrange themselves. If you interfere, you are likely to prolong everything." "Well, I'll try at least," said the young lady. At the second outburst against him, Jimmy had crouched down by a tree, half hiding behind it, half pretending that he was not hiding behind it. He turned his sad gaze toward the lake. The bit of water, seen through the shadows, seemed perpendicular, a slate-coloured wall. He heard a noise near him, and turning he perceived the young lady looking down at him. In her hands she held plates. "May I sit near you?" she asked coolly. Jimmy could hardly believe his ears. After disposing herself of the plate upon the pine needle, she made brief explanation. "They are rather crowded, you see, over there. I don't like to be crowded at a picnic, so I thought I'd come here. I hope you don't mind." Jimmy made haste to find his tongue. "Oh, I don't mind. I like to have you here." The ingenuous emphasis made it appear that the fact of his liking to have her there was in the nature of a law-dispelling phenomenon, but she did not smile. "How large is that lake?" she asked. Jimmy, falling into the snare at once, began to talk in a manner of a proprietor of the lake. "Oh, it's almost 20 miles long, and in one place it's almost 4 miles wide, and it's too deep, awful deep, and it's got real steamboats on it, and oh, lots of other boats, and do you go out on it sometimes?" "Oh, lots of times. My father got a boat," he said, eyeing her to note the effect of his words. She was correctly pleased and struck with wonder. "Oh, has he?" she cried, as if she never before had heard of a man owning a boat. Jimmy continued. "Yes, and it's a great big boat too, with sails, real sails, and sometimes he takes me out in here too, and once he took me fishing, and we had sandwiches, plenty of 'em, and my father, he drank beer right out of the bottle, right out of the bottle." The young lady was properly overwhelmed by this amazing intelligence. Jimmy saw the impression he had created, and he enthusiastically resumed his narrative. "And after he let me throw the bottle in the water, I throwed 'em way, way, way out, and they sank and never come up," he concluded dramatically. His face was glorified. He had forgotten all about the pail. He was absorbed in his communion with a beautiful lady who was so interested in what he had to say. She indicated one of the plates and said indifferently, "Perhaps you would like some of those sandwiches I made them. Do you like olives? And there's a deviled egg. I made that also." "Did you really?" said Jimmy politely. His face gloomed for a moment because the pail was recalled to his mind, but he timidly possessed himself of a sandwich. "Hope you are not going to scorn my deviled eggs," said his goddess. "I am very proud of it." He did not. He scorned little that was on the plate. Their gentle intimacy was ineffable to the boy. He thought he had a friend, a beautiful lady, who liked him more than she did anybody at the picnic. To say the least, this was proved by the fact she had flung aside the luxuries of the spread cloth to sit with him. The exile, thus early did he fall a victim to woman's wiles. "Where do you live?" he asked suddenly. "Oh, a long way from here, in New York." His next question was put very bluntly. "Are you married?" "Oh, no," she answered gravely. Jimmy was silent for a time, during which he glanced shyly and furtively up at her face. It was evident that he was somewhat embarrassed. Finally he said, "When I grow up to be a man." "Oh, that is some time yet," said the beautiful lady. "But when I do, I should like to marry you." "Well, I will remember it," she answered, "but don't talk of it now, because it's such a long time, and I wouldn't wish you to consider yourself bound." She smiled at him. He began to brag. "When I grow up to be a man, I'm going to have lots and lots of money, and I'm going to have a great big house, and a horse, and a shotgun, and lots of books. about elephant and tigers and lots of ice cream and pie and caramels as before. She was impressed. He could see it, and I'm gonna have lots of children. Lots of children. I'm going to give them pails, about 300, I guess, and there will be none of them. All girls. They'll all be boys like me. Oh my, she said. His garment of shame was gone from him. The pail was dead and well buried. It seemed to him that months elapsed as he dwelt in happiness near the beautiful lady and trumpeted his vanity. At last there was a shout. Come on, we're going home. The picnickers trooped out of the grove. The children wished to resume their jeering, for Jimmy still gripped his pail. But they were restrained by the circumstances. He was walking at the side of a beautiful lady. During this journey he abandoned many of his habits. For instance, he never travelled without skipping gracefully from crack to crack between the stones, or without pretending that he was a train of cars, or without some mumming device of childhood. But now he behaved with dignity. He had made no sense of his noise, of his little mouse. He escorted the beautiful lady to the gate of the Earl home, where he awkwardly, solemnly, and wistfully shook hands in goodbye. He watched her go up the walk. The door clanged. On his way home he dreamed. One of these dreams was fascinating. Supposing the beautiful lady was his teacher in school. Oh my, wouldn't he be a good boy, sitting like a statuette all day long, and knowing every lesson to perfection, and everything. And then supposing that a boy should sass her. Jimmy painted himself waylaying that boy on the homeward road, and the fate of the boy was a thing to make strong men cover their eyes with their hands, and she would like him more and more and more and more and more, and he would be a little god. But as he was entering his father's grounds, an appalling recollection came to him. He was returning with the bread and butter, and the salmon untouched in the pail. He could imagine the cook, 9 feet tall, waving her fist. And so that's what I took trouble for, is it? So you could bring it back? So you could bring the pail back? He skulked towards the house like a marauding bushranger. When he neared the kitchen door, he made a desperate rush past it, aiming to gain the stables and there secrete his guilt. He was nearing them when a thunderous voice hailed him from the rear. Jimmy Trescott, where are you going with that pail? It was the cook. He made no reply, but plunged into the shelter of the stables. He whirled the lid from the pail and dashed its contents beneath a heap of blankets. Then he stood panting, his eyes on the door. The cook did not pursue, but she was bawling, Jimmy Trescott, what you doing with that pail? He came forth, swinging it. Nothing, he said in a virtuous protest. I know better, she said sharply as she relieved him of his curse. In the morning, Jimmy was playing near the stable when he heard a shout from Peter Washington, who attended Dr. Trescott's horses. Jim! Oh, Jim! What? Come, yeah. Jimmy went reluctantly to the door of the stable, and Peter Washington asked, What's this ya fish and bread doing under des ya blankups? I don't know. I didn't have nothing to do with it, answered Jimmy indignantly. Don't tell me, cried Peter Washington, as he flung it all away. Don't tell me when I fin fish and bread on a des ya blankups. I don't do and think these ya hoses are your pops. Put 'em, I know. And if I catch any more dish your fish and bread in dish your stable, I'll tell ya pop. January 1900, Harper's Magazine, Volume 100, pp. 320324.